In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of these resume templates that you might use if you're a more experienced candidate and you're interested in going into investment banking. And I'm going to cover three categories of candidates here. The first category, what we're going to start with here, is someone who's at the MBA level. So someone who's in business school currently and is either thinking about an internship in the near future or is about to graduate, but they're still in school right now and they're applying for either summer internships or for full-time jobs post-graduation. The second category I'm going to go into is anyone who's working full time right now. So maybe you've gone to business school, maybe you haven't gone to business school, but you're working full time right now and you're interested in making a transition from whatever field you're currently in into investment banking or really anything in finance. And then the third and final category that I'm going to go over is if you've been working in investment banking for years or possibly even longer than that by this point, and maybe you're already at the associate level, you've been there for a couple of years, so you're pretty experienced, have a lot of deals and clients to speak about. Maybe you're at the VP level or even above that, and I'm going to go over how to present your resume if that's the case. And as we'll see by going through this, that is actually the most different out of all these scenarios. The first two are pretty similar, and by following the university student template that we went through previously, you can actually get a lot out of those and you'll be 95% of the way there. But the last one does require some more explanation. But for now, let's go back to our MBA student resume template. And we see here that it's really not too much different from our university student resume template, if you remember what that looked like. To refresh your memory, I'm going to pull that up right now. And you can see right here, for the university student resume template, I recommended having your education on top, followed by your work and leadership experience next, and then your skills, activities, and interests here at the bottom. For university student, I said that you want to focus on 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4 key experiences under work and leadership. You can include student clubs, but try to focus on internships, full-time jobs if you had them, anything of that nature, and then have all your skills, activities, and interests here at the bottom. And the MBA student template is really not too much different from that. You still want to have your education section here at the top, and the reason is that you're still in school. You need to put your business school name first and then give the title of your degree, say the location, and give your graduation date on the side as I have it right here. And then you also need to have your undergraduate institution as well. Now, if you've been to more schools than this, the question always comes up, how much do you include? I think honestly at the MBA level, you don't want to focus quite as much on education as an undergraduate might. So if you have more institutions than this, maybe if it's common in your region, you can include them if you have the space. For example, in Europe, it's common sometimes to list more than just business school and undergraduate. You might go all the way back to secondary school, for example. So if it's common and you have the space, you can do that. I would recommend greatly condensing your education section at the MBA level, though. You'll also note that you don't need to list GPA, SAT scores, and information of that nature for your university that you went to. Sometimes this can come up if they're doing some type of background check and they happen to ask for your transcript, but it's certainly not necessary to list on your resume. At this level, what they really care about are what schools you went to at the business school and undergraduate level. And so you don't need to go into a whole lot of detail on your GPA, SAT scores, activities, and things like that for education. For professional experience, you'll notice first off that I've relabeled this from work and leadership experience to professional experience. That's because at the MBA level, you don't want to really be writing about student activities, student groups, anything like that, especially if they're from all the way back from when you were an undergraduate. What you want to do is focus on the 2 to 3 key work experiences, the key full-time work experiences that you've had. I would say in general, you want to go back maybe 5 years or so, maybe 5 to 10 years if you're coming into the MBA program at a slightly more experienced, older level. You might want to go back and focus on the most recent 10 years of your work experience, but this is going to be highly dependent on where you've worked, what level you're at, and whether you're applying to business school right out of undergraduate, you've waited a couple years, or you're applying after even more time than that. But I would say you still want to pick and choose very carefully and don't try to include too much here. Focus on the 2 to 3 key work experiences that you've had and expand on them and go into as much detail as you can and hit on the major points right here. you'll see that again, you want to pick either the project or client-centric structure that I have right here, and also in the second entry right here, or you want to go with the task-centric structure. And I covered this in the university student video, but essentially anything such as finance, real estate, professional services like accounting, maybe even law if you have some kind of legal background before getting your MBA. Anything professional services, sales related, anything with clients should really be using this project transaction client structure. Anything that was more like IT or perhaps marketing if you didn't work with specific clients, anything of that nature where you can't really point to specific projects can be using this format where you're talking about specific tasks and your results. It's still important to give the specifics and the results at the MBA level. One difference that I'll point out here is that it's more important to focus on leadership and client management skills if you've had significant work experience and you're trying to get in at the associate level into investment banking. And the basic reason for that is once you get to that level, it's assumed that you're going to be in finance long term and that you're going to be trying to reach the top of the ladder. To do that, you need to show really strong leadership skills and you need to get to the point where you're able to generate business and bring in new clients for the firm. So it's important to demonstrate evidence that you can actually do that. The way you do that on your resume is by talking more about leadership experience and emphasizing that more than undergraduates might. And again, if you don't have specific client experience here to point to, it's not the end of the world, but if you had anything like that, you really need to emphasize that because client management skills, leadership are two of the key skills that they look for more at the associate level versus the analyst level in investment banking. They're really looking for people who can manage the team, drive, and get things done as opposed to just someone who's really good in Excel, someone who's really good quantitatively. One exception I'll point out here to what I just mentioned about picking the 2 or 3 key work experiences to focus on is let's say you've done something that is not closely related to finance. So maybe you've been in IT or you worked in healthcare policy or you were in marketing at a firm. And right before you start your MBA program, you did some kind of pre-MBA program, maybe interning at a private equity firm or an investment bank or something of that nature. Well, then even if your program only lasted for a few months, I would still dedicate one of these work experience entries to whatever kind of pre-MBA program you did. Because if it's highly relevant to finance, you want to highlight that and scale back on the rest of your experience. So even if you spent 5 years working at a company, if you did a pre-MBA program that was maybe 3 or 4 months long and it's just way more relevant to finance, you want to spend just as much, if not more, space on that program as opposed to all your other previous work experience. And again, it's not lying, it's just changing the emphasis and focusing on a different point so that you show yourself off better and impress interviewers and win offers that way, as opposed to making it seem like you're too much of a technical person or your background is not really aligned with finance or banking. One final point here is at the bottom under skills, activities, and interests. This section gets increasingly less relevant the higher up you move in finance and in work in general. I would say that you can still include this at the MBA level, but it should certainly be shorter than what an undergraduate or recent graduate might have. Definitely include any language abilities you have. Activities are fine. I would try to skew this one more toward professional organizations once you're at this level, as opposed to just talking about student clubs or anything at your university. Of course, if you're in something that's very well known and you happen to be interviewing with an alumnus from either your business school or undergraduate, sure, you can go ahead and list that here. But again, I would try to cut back on this if you're at this level because these types of items matter less and less the higher up you move within the corporate world. So that's a brief overview of the MBA student investment banking resume template. It's very similar to the university student one, just that we have some additional information about our business school here at the top. And then we also have a bit of a change to our work experience section in that we focus less on student clubs and activities, and we really want to devote our attention to our full-time work experience as we are doing right here. Of course, we still want to use either the project-centric or task-centric structure and pick one for each of the experiences that we have. Try to bias it toward projects and clients if possible. If not, just talk about the tasks that you worked on. Pre-MBA programs are definitely a good idea to mention here, especially anything related to finance or at least more related to finance than your previous work experience. One other issue that comes up sometimes with work experience here is what to do if you've only had one full-time job. Should you just write the one entry, or should you go back and list internships? I would say it's good to have at least two entries here. So if you just had one full-time job and you're applying to business school, or you're already in business school and you're applying to banking jobs, I would say spend most of your space on that one full-time work entry, and then maybe talk about your internship at the bottom and write maybe one or two bullets about that, just so you have some balance and so you have more than one entry on this page. And of course, the skills, activities, and interests section, as I mentioned before, should be shorter and more condensed at this level. So now let's go into our full-time employee investment banking resume template and look at what kind of resume you might write if you're working full-time in another field and you're trying to make the move into finance right now. Okay, so here's the template for someone who's working full-time and is trying to transition into finance. As you can see, it is actually almost exactly the same as the template that we just went through before. The only difference really is that professional experience is here at the top, because our person has already graduated from business school in this case. And then we have education next with the business school name, the university name, and then skills, activities, and interests here at the bottom. Again, this last section can be cut out entirely in some cases if you're experienced enough and you just don't have the space or nothing's relevant there. It's more important for undergraduates and MBA students than it is for someone who's post MBA or someone who's been working for a few years and is pretty experienced, has some solid references, and has a long history of work experience to point to. But there's really not too much of a difference between this and the MBA student template. I would say no matter how experienced you are, unless you're, say, for example, a CEO or a C-level executive with 20 to 30 years of work experience, you really want to stay focused on the two or three key entries over the past 5 to 10 years that highlight your skills. You can go back further than that if you want, but be careful about making this too crowded. You always want to keep it to one page, again, unless you're extremely senior or, as we'll see coming up next, if you have a long history of transactions or clients to point to. Okay, so here's our last resume template. And this one is for someone who's been working in investment banking or really anything in finance, whether it's private equity or hedge funds or private wealth management or anything like that, and has a long history of transactions and clients to point to. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about this template is that this person has worked at the same bank at both the associate and the VP level, and then the person worked at a different bank at the analyst level. It looks like they went to business school and attended an undergraduate institution as well. But one thing that's different about this one compared to the investment banker resume template that we looked at before, which is right here, you see here that we have this selected transaction experience section right here, where we go through each of these 5 different transactions in a good amount of detail, and we go into what the analyst did in terms of valuation, what they did in terms of the business results on the deal and the client and everything. And in this one, in our experienced investment banker resume template, we don't have that, at least not on the front page. And the reason is because in this case, our person has so much deal experience that it's not really practical to list everything on one page as we did before. Instead, what you want to do is focus on giving a few summary sentences for each position, and then on your next page is where you want to get into your transaction experience. So we see what they've done at the VP, associate, and analyst level right here. Now, a couple quick points to make here. This is presumably for someone who's been recently promoted to the VP level. If you're a new associate or an analyst at any level, do not use this template. Instead, you want to be using the investment banker resume template that we went through before, where you just have a single page and you list your transactions there. The reason being that it looks quite strange if you're someone that junior to have a separate page for your transactions. This template should really only be used if you're an experienced associate, VP, or even higher level than that, and you really do have this long list of transactions and an extensive history, maybe 5 to 10 years worth of experience to point to. So don't go and start using this if you're applying for internships, you're a new analyst, you're applying for associate or analyst roles or anything of that nature. Only use this if you have a ton of experience. We see a couple of the important points to make here. We see that in general, the person has progressed, and at the analyst level, they describe their experience by talking about the deals they worked on, the valuation modeling work they did, client presentations, due diligence. And then at the associate level, it progresses a bit. They still talk about the deals, but in this case, they're talking more about managing the team of analysts. They're talking about how they were promoted to VP 1 year earlier than peers, about their collaboration with management teams and how they worked with them to support negotiations with buyers, and then how they're also a staffer, someone who assigns work to analysts and associates, and a mentor for some of the incoming summer interns. They also helped out with training, and if you had helped out with recruiting, on campus recruiting at schools, for example, this is where you'd write about that as well. We make a note in these cases here that the transactions are listed on the following page so that someone looking at this doesn't get confused. And then the VP level, we see again, this person has listed the number of deals and talked about managing associates and analysts. And we see here that they're making a note of notable deals and mergers that they've worked on. The reason that we're including this here is because at this level, you want to get across anything major, anything that's made headlines that you've worked on. So that way someone can just look at the front page of this quickly and get a sense of what you've done and if it's anything newsworthy, anything that's good to bring up in an interview or when you're networking with them. And then we see here at the bottom that they are talking about the sourcing process, developing relationships, developing calling lists for the technology industry. The reason this is important is because as you move up in investment banking, it really becomes more and more of a sales job versus an analytical job. And so at the top of the food chain, basically your only role is to bring in new clients for the firm and then to hand them off to other people to actually execute the deals and get the company sold, sell it to investors, or to help it buy another company. And so at the VP level, it starts becoming very important to indicate your relationship development skills, how you've helped senior bankers bring in business. And so that's what this person is doing right here. And we also see again that the education section is greatly condensed here. There's a minimum of information listed. You could even make it shorter than this if you wanted to. And skills, activities, and interests, this is almost irrelevant at this level. I've left it in for your reference in case you do happen to have languages or activities that might be relevant, certifications, maybe interests. But again, I would say at this level, honestly, you're fine actually removing this and just taking it out altogether. So keep that in mind. Don't feel pressure to leave this in. If you don't have the space, just take it out because they honestly don't care too much about this at this level. Now in this transaction experience page, we see that the format follows exactly the format of the first page here, where we have the bank name, the position, the location, and then the start date and end date. And we see again that this is very close to some of the language that we include on the investment banking analyst or associate resume template right here. The difference here is that at the analyst level, they're still pretty much following the template. They're talking about the valuation work they've done, how it was actually used to support the deal process, the negotiation process. We see in this bankruptcy example that, again, they're talking about valuation. They're talking about how work they did, analytical work, supported the Chapter 11 bankruptcy process right here. When we move to the associate level, we see that it changes a bit. And now they're talking more about not only analytical work, but also management. So here we see that they've listed collaborating with CFO and head of business development to determine key priorities for acquisitions and partnership deals. They're talking about how they guided analysts, so how they led analysts to do some of the analysis, some of the research work, and then how they actually presented it or participated in this board presentation. Again, it gets more and more important to emphasize leadership skills as you move up the ladder. This bullet for the LBO of a network communications company is actually the same. This is fine because associates actually do a fair amount of quantitative work as well, depending on your group and the bank you're at. But it's fine to include bullets like this, especially on more complex deals and scenarios like leverage buyouts. For the IPO, again, very similar. We see the focus has shifted to managing and working with the analyst and helping him select the appropriate comparables for this valuation. And then finally here at the top under this VP. So this person is presumably a relatively new VP. So we only have 2 deals listed here, which is fine for now. We see here that now this person is actually getting involved with the sales process. So they're actually pitching the company themselves to strategic and financial buyers. They're helping the management team directly. They're working on site with them to develop the presentation material, and they're managing the analyst and associate who are creating the presentation. Now, depending on the bank and group you're at, the VP may not always be doing this. Sometimes it's more of a management role. Sometimes it's more of a role where the MD just hands off the deal to them, especially for more experienced VPs, senior VPs, directors. So it really varies by the bank, but this is an example of the types of bullets that you could use if you're more experienced and you actually contributed at this level. Then we see this merger of equals right here. And we see how, again, This is actually not too much different from what an analyst or associate might write. The difference here is that they're emphasizing how they've guided the analyst or associate. They've led them to create this complex merger model and how they use this model to then discuss the synergies in this particular deal with both management teams. So there's not too much of a difference here in terms of the transactions. The main difference really is that as you move up the ladder, you want to emphasize leadership and client interaction, working with management teams, and presenting and actually moving the needle and making a difference in the deal as you get more senior within investment banking or anything else in finance. Now, if you've done private equity or hedge funds or anything like that, these bullets are not going to be too much different. You still want to emphasize leadership. You still want to emphasize your contributions to negotiation. And as you move up, you want to emphasize your ability to source and generate ideas. And in the case of private equity and hedge funds, for example, those are investment ideas. For investment banking, those are potential client ideas and developing relationships with those potential clients. So hopefully now you have a better idea of how to structure your resume if you're more experienced. Either you're at the MBA level, you're working full time, or you're an experienced investment banker and you are putting together your resume and looking to move elsewhere. These resume video tutorials should have covered 95% of the questions you have on resumes. Really, the only thing left at this point is to go over specific language for certain jobs, certain internships, and certain industries. But by using these templates and making sure you're using the right one, depending on which level you're at and how much experience you have, you should be 95% of the way there when it comes to crafting a resume that gets you interviews and offers.